Wow. Well, the obvious, I guess, disconnect there is, are we going to solve the huge global problems we have with simply the individual, dealing with the individual? And I think it's a good starter question. Uh, I do think there have to be some intermediate gifts. In other words, the spiritual direction is very much the enlightening, the freeing, the liberating of the individual soul. It isn't meant to be corporate work, although sometimes I've loved to say that when I'm teaching well, I feel like I'm doing group spiritual direction. So sometimes it can be a group work. But hopefully you would be liberating people with gifts for organization, management, journalism, who are going to influence the corporate level too. But it does have to go to that level. We can't think that just by liberating this person, this person, this person, if we don't get those people working together, it's not going to move to the tremendous social problems we're facing today. But it still starts there. You know, if we don't have liberated, enlivened, aware journalists, for example, it isn't going to make a great deal of difference. They've got to have a passion for both. Our center in New Mexico, where I'm from, is called the Center for Action and Contemplation. We're almost 21 years old now. And looking at the pattern of 21 years of the people who come for our internship programs, our conferences, invariably, by personality, by temperament, we all have a bias. And that's okay. There are the inner people, if you can call them that, and there's the outer people who are engaged in action, change, and they both have their own set of limitations and their own set of gifts. We've often said that the most important word in our title is not action, it's not contemplation, it's and. And I'm amazed how much work that is, because the activists, the doers, the change agents have to be stretched to say this has got to come from an inner foundation and not just outer anger. And just as equally, there's a lot of inner people, especially if you were raised as a Christian, that you idealize prayer, spirituality, devotions, which sounds like the higher way. But I know now it's also a place to hide. And I can see why people like John Cashin spoke of pseudo contemplation, that the word contemplation can inflate the ego, make you think that you are on a higher level, when in fact you have not stretched to feel the pain of the world and the immense suffering of our world. So we both have to stretch. The hope for me, and I hope I can talk about this with the group, is that up to now, and I think we reflected history, that looked up to higher ups, people with special costumes and special titles and special degrees and what we called in the church ordination. What's happening now, and we're seeing this even in our politics, that it's not enough to hold an office. You've got to have competence. America now is just, begging for competence. And I think the same thing is happening in the church. And I don't mean any disrespect by that. I'm a priest myself. But I think we now know, just to be honest, you can be an ordained priest, you can be an educated minister, and not really be competent to understand the human soul, how change happens, how people grow, how grace is communicated, is a very different skill set than simply saying, I'm ordained. So I think it's a real sign of advancement that we can expect what we call, interesting enough, lay people. Right? And the very word defining, people who don't know, people who aren't very competent. And this is the great turnaround that's happening, that we're finding, what? Some of the lay people have the competence without formal ordination. So it's going to be lay-led. And it's in a position where it doesn't have to fight the structures of the church either. It moves purely by competence. Purely. Now I know they're not going to get rich, unfortunately. Competence doesn't seem to get you rich, unfortunately. So anyway. Well, um, your own T.S. Eliot from England, he says, Lord, teach us to care and not to care. I love that line. And I'd say it in regard to the discernment of any vocation. You have to have a passion for it. It has to have a place that fits in your heart already, which is the way the Holy Spirit speaks, to say, I'm calling you to this. I name it within you as a desire. But then I don't think you can care too much. Do you understand? We always say, like, people who need to be ordained too much, don't ordain them for a while. Well, I'd apply that to a certain degree, not as much, because spiritual direction is not an office with all kind of perks, as ordination was. But I'd still say that if you need the label too much, the title too much, the self-image too much, if you be pushing too hard, I'm a spiritual director and I want to be recognized, then I would delay that person's validation as a spiritual director. So, Lord, teach us to care and simultaneously not to care. Yeah. Now, did I connect it with world peace, which I'm very glad you are connecting. Thank you for doing that. Again, if you have obsessive people, needy people, people who need the role and the title too much, or the power, if there's that much power with it. There really is, but not what the world calls power. That always sets you up for aggressive, violent relationships, eventually. I don't know how long it'll take, but if you need it too much, you're going to fight to protect it. You're going to manipulate to protect it. You're going to be deceitful to protect it. There you have the foundation of unpeace, non-peace, violence. Maybe it's low-level violence, but that's where it all starts. And we've seen it inside of our churches, where everybody's aggressively competing, fighting one another. Well, that organization is not going to be a place that is going to understand nonviolent anything. Yeah. It can't be a peacemaking church.